We're joined today by actor Dean Butler. You might remember him as Almanzo Wilder from Little House on the Prairie. He has a new book out. It's called Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Dean, how's it going today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure.
I got to say, it's an honor speaking with you. Thank you again.
Oh, well, aren't you nice? Thank you for, really, I appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk to you, and we'll have a nice conversation.
Well, let's talk about the new book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Can you tell the listeners a bit about the new book?
Well, I as the Little House 50th anniversary was approaching a couple of years ago, I started thinking about how I might be able to help celebrate that event. And I'd been asked for years, in light of the fact that so many of the female cast members of Little House had written books, when I was going to write my book. And so, the opportunity meets a big moment, and I decided that 2024 would be a good time to do this. And so we created a proposal. I created a proposal and submitted it. And I was responded to very nicely, and Kensington Publishing wanted to publish the book. And so we started that process, and I sat down starting in January of 2023, January 9th, I think the morning of January 9th at 5 a.m. in my dining room where I'm sitting right now doing this interview with you, and started writing based on the outline. And it took 7 months. I submitted the first draft to Kensington on July 31st. And, here we are coming up on June 25th, 2024, right on schedule, unless, knock wood, unless some hiccup happens. Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond will hit bookstores and be available on Amazon.com and at BarnesandNoble.com. And, so it's pretty exciting. Frankly, I never imagined that I would do something like this, but now that I've done it, I'm really pleased that I have. And obviously I hope people who choose to acquire the book will enjoy it.
Most definitely. And you mentioned the 50th anniversary of Little House on the Prairie. Are you amazed that this show has become the cultural phenomenon that it has? 50 years later, people are still nuts about it.
Yeah, it's really an incredible gift for all of us who were a part of it. At the time when Michael Landon said that people would be watching the program long after we were all gone, that seemed a little unlikely to me, but I was 25 at that point. And when you're 25, you're immortal. You're never going to be gone. Well, next week I'll turn 68, and it seems an absolute certainty that people will be watching the program after we're all gone. This July we will acknowledge 33 years since Michael passed, which is just astonishing. It's just hard to imagine that he's been gone for that amount of time. But, on the other hand, keeping with what Michael said, he's never been gone, and he will never be gone as long as this program and as long as our show, Little House and Highway to Heaven and Bonanza, continue to air wherever they air. Michael will live on. And I think that's one of the incredibly powerful things about television or filmed or taped media, is that there's a kind of immortality created with that. And people have an opportunity to be remembered because these programs go on and on and on. And it's just, as I started off saying, it's an incredible gift, and we are all very grateful for it.
Yeah, when it comes to Michael Landon, I don't know if a lot of people realize how much he actually did behind the camera. He basically wrote, produced, directed, starred, and just about everything he did. That guy was definitely a Renaissance man for sure.
No, there's no doubt about it. Michael wore the big hats that someone has to wear on any major production. He was the executive producer. He was the star. And then really powerfully, he was certainly the lead director on the program. And while he didn't write every episode, he did rewrite every episode. So all the polishes were done by Michael. And so he had an enormous effect on what was happening on the screen. You know, the challenge of that for anybody who was working with Michael is that, and I apologize, my dog is an incessant barker and people are walking by the house and he's barking like a madman. Here, I'm going to close this door so he doesn't have so much to see out here. Excuse me, buddy. Back. Sorry, you're hearing me talk to my dog. So, you know, when you're in a situation like that, you like to feel like you could have a number of different allies if you have a problem or a challenge to work out. And with Michael, you know, if you had a problem with the director and wanted to go see the executive producer about it, you know, you were talking to the same guy. If you had a problem with the, if you wanted to talk about the scenes you were doing with the head writer, you also were talking to the star and the executive producer and the director. So, you know, if you did not have a lot of opportunities if you needed to fix something or wanted to change something or tweak something or express your concerns, you couldn't really create. I mean, you would have one ally if you had that ally, if he was going to be receptive, but it was challenging because he was all things. And so you had to go through him to get anything that you felt like you needed. And now that's a challenge for an actor on the one hand, but you know, in terms of the quality of the program, because it was going through one voice and one kind of thinking about what it was very, very unified. And as Michael was very fond of saying, and I think he's right, good television or nothing good creatively is made by a committee. You really need to have a singular point of view about what you're trying to do. And Michael absolutely provided a singular point of view. So while it may have been challenging on the one hand, on the other hand, the outcomes were terrific because he was so in control of what we were doing.
So was that for you? Because when you were cast as Almanzo Wilder, you were pretty new to Hollywood. Was that a help for you to kind of know who the one guy was that you could go to kind of see your way through this big production?
Well, I think there was no question who was in charge. I mean, you could have been brand new. I'd been involved in some productions and seen how the hierarchy of productions worked, but it was very clear immediately that Michael was the guy, and it wasn't always easy. You know, in all candor, that was not an easy thing to go through. It took me a while to understand what the implications of it all were, but because he was so busy, there wasn't a lot of time to probe for sort of that kind of mentoring that you'd like to get as you step into a situation like that. No one worked harder on the program than Michael did. I mean, this guy was working 7 days a week, incredibly long hours, far longer than everyone else worked, because the things he was doing required him to be active before people came to work and after people went home from work and during lunch hours. And he was constantly in motion. And add to that, then he had his family at home and so he's being a husband and a father and all of that. He had a lot on his plate. And so there wasn't a lot of time to explore with him what he was doing. You had a great opportunity to watch what he was doing. If you were there, you were seeing it, and you could see his process at work. But it was so intuitive for him. He had this I never saw a moment's doubt in Michael's eyes when he was doing what he was doing, or a moment of hesitation. He was crystal clear about every step, and I think he was always thinking 4 or 5 steps ahead on everything that he was doing. So he just was really incredible to watch. On top of that, he was amazing with fans who would come on the stage to see, he would visit with people, and he did things in addition to the work and being with his family. He would do things for charity, particularly children's charities. He was an extraordinary human being. He really was. And to think that he did everything he did in 54 years is, just over 54 years is pretty amazing.
And of course, when you came on the show, you shared the screen for the most part with Melissa Gilbert. I wanted to ask you about that. And I guess, was that a little weird for you to navigate your on-screen relationship, considering the age difference at the time?
Well, I think it was, it was definitely a delicate thing. I mean, it had to be done. It had to be done in a very careful way, for a whole range of reasons. I mean, but I think probably most importantly, obviously there was a consideration for the audience that this had to be handled in a way that would not make the audience uncomfortable, although we did get letters from people, from individuals, and there were letters to editors and TV sections where people wrote in saying, what are the producers of Little House doing putting this 15-year-old girl with this man? Now, she was, in our favor, she was a young 15, and as it turns out, I was a young 23. So as much as there was 8 years difference, we were not, I was not a really sophisticated person. Here's everyone's coming home. Sorry, I was not really super sophisticated. And so I think I was very much raised to be sensitive to women and to be respectful of women. And as much as Melissa was really a girl at that point, I was respectful of that. So it was challenging, but I think we made it work. And I think that the age difference and the care with which we approached all this was part of the charm of it. And I think audiences loved the fantasy of it. It was a very romanticized exploration and development of a relationship, and it was very carefully, sweetly done. And I think that's one of the things about it that's endured for many, many years, is that people love the sweetness of it and the simplicity of it.
On the other hand, it's funny that Little House has kind of become sort of a punchline, I guess, for people when they make fun of things for, maybe being too quaint or wholesome. And in actuality, I mean, you had episodes with racism and murder and rape and children dying. I mean, there was some intense stuff going on in Walnut Grove.
Yeah. No, there really were. I think it was Michael used the program to explore all kinds of issues. And I was just watching, an episode yesterday in preparation for a podcast we do, that dealt in a very direct way with anti-Semitism. There were episodes. There was an episode about obesity. There were certainly a plentiful number of issues about racism. The Wisdom of Solomon that young Todd Bridges starred in. There was an episode called Engine Kid where you had to deal with where Walnut Grove. The kids in Walnut Grove were dealing with, well, a young boy was dealing with the racism that was the bias that was thrown at Native Americans. There was drug abuse. There was, one of the most controversial episodes Little House ever did. There was a rape in an episode called Sylvia. So there was a lot going on. I think what made it all work is there was so much heart surrounding. But these weren't challenging issues. So these are challenging issues that people face every single day. But Michael went at all of these stories with a very clear sense of what was the right way to behave and what was, in his mind, the wrong way to behave. There was not a lot of nuance in this. And so I think it was very clear storytelling and with very strong, clear perspectives about these are issues, and this is how we think, this is how in Walnut Grove we deal with these issues, as much as they are challenging, but we are going to come at people with a sense of love and decency and community, and at its best. And of course, we had the characters in the program that would be providing the alternative. I mean, the Olsen family, and particularly Mrs. Olsen and Nellie Olsen, were there to be the counter voice. It's society's counter voice. If there was a dark point of view on Little House, it came primarily from those two characters. And so the audience knew what to expect. And so the teaching was very clear. And it was very identifiable where the good was and where the not good was. And I think this was part of the genius of Michael's storytelling. And it made lessons clearer to understand, to understand, situations easier to understand, and lessons easier to teach, because you knew the characters were very clear and the lessons were clear because of that. So it's amazing what we did. And yes, for all that talk about that punchline about sweet and sentimental and so on, yes, it was that, but it had some teeth too.
Well, you guys made a lot of television back then. Do you have a favorite episode of the show or a favorite memory of maybe filming an episode that you could point to?
There are lots of wonderful memories. I mean, and favorite episodes. I think one of my favorite episodes is not one that I was involved in because I wasn't there yet. And now, of course, the title of the episode is completely flipped out of my head. So I'll have to come back to it. See, it'll pop into my head in just a second. In terms of episodes that I was involved in, and I love the Sweet 16 episode because it's this turning point moment in the series. This is towards the end of season 6, and this is when the romance became the Laura and Almanzo romance became a mutual thing. So from the very beginning, Laura was infatuated and Almanzo was sort of oblivious to it all. And I think it needed to be that way. And then Sweet 16 was that moment when Almanzo's eyes opened and saw her in a different way. And I think, the audience was ready for that. And I think it was handled very nicely. And of course, the series, that was a trajectory-changing episode for the series. I mean, Laura was no longer the little girl in pigtails wearing a smock dress. She was really a young woman now, and we were on that path towards this marriage that people who had read the books starting in the early 1930s knew that these two characters were on. So there was no mystery about where it was going. Once that kiss happened in Sweet 16, these two people were going to be together, and that's the path we went down.
I think for me, you had a lot of opportunities to be comedic, but then also had the dramatic episodes, and the one where Almanzo has a stroke, and then the baby's born, and then the crops get wiped out. I mean, there's some of those episodes that were just kind of bonkers with all the stuff that was happening to these poor people.
Well, that was an episode called Days of Sunshine, Days of Shadow, and I mean, there were a lot of shadows in that episode, and I think there were a couple of things going on there. I think Michael had made the decision that he was going to leave, that he was going to step away, and in advance of that, they really needed to test and see if we could carry it. If we could be strong enough on camera to be the central characters in the piece, or among the central characters in the piece, with Ma and Pa gone. And so they threw everything. They threw everything at us to see what would happen and see how it would work. So you asked about favorite moments. I mean, one of my favorite moments in the series that I was involved in was that moment. And since you may know the episode, the episode well. At the end, after Charles and Almanzo rebuild the house, and Laura she doesn't know what's been going on, and she comes and finds the house, and Almanzo's sitting there in his wheelchair, and there's this moment where he stands up and walks to her and tells her that everything's going to be okay, that he's back, that he's himself again. That was a really lovely scene, and her reaction to it was wonderful. It was beautifully shot. David Rose, our composer, wrote a beautiful cue there. It was just a very romantic, beautiful moment, and it's one that I'm particularly, was particularly satisfying to be a part of. Just the recovery, and Little House was always about recoveries. There were always problems, and there was always the recovery, and that was a lovely recovery.
Definitely, and I love that it seems like you guys were so close, and the surviving cast now, even you're at a lot of conventions, and even in the real Walnut Grove here in Minnesota, I've seen you guys pop up. It's great that you're all still so tight-knit after all these years.
Yeah, I think the deal is, bottom line, I think we all recognize that this is bigger than we are. We're part of something that's pretty substantial, and I think we are honored to be a part of that, and we respect it as a group. It's when you see the people that come up to you, and when we go to all these different places around the country now, and particularly this year because of this 50th anniversary celebration, the warmth and the appreciation that comes at each one of us is it's a beautiful affirmation of what the program was for people. So it's very, very satisfying, and we're very proud to have been a part of it. There are lots of shows that get to 50 years. A very relatively small number when you look at the amount of content that's created for audiences to watch. But while there are a good number of shows that have gotten to 50th anniversaries, we are among those shows, and it puts Little House in some pretty rarefied air. When you look at the totality of television, it's one thing for a show to survive. Shows all survive 50 years, but to be as active as this is, Little House still airs in 140 countries around the world every single day. It's translated into over 40 languages. It runs on 3 or 4 different streaming services and cable systems around the country now. You can watch Little House 24 hours a day if that's what you decide you want to do. And of course, that's the power of the streaming world we're in now, is that it's, you are the programmer and you get to decide what you want to watch. And we find as we, look, I hope that people watch all kinds of things because, people need lots of different input. But the fact that so many people that we meet love watching the program all the time is, what a compliment. What a great compliment for everybody and for everyone who was on screen and writers and producers and everybody. It's just a huge compliment that people love it so much.
For sure. And I know you've mostly moved behind the camera these days, and obviously the book has taken up a lot of your time, but is there some other stuff you're working on now as far as the entertainment business goes?
Well, I just was involved in the production of the 50th anniversary celebration that we did in Simi Valley, which for Little House was the largest event that has ever been done surrounding or around the show. That was a year of a really solid year of time working on that. There are other projects, other documentary-like projects that I'm involved in now, but there's nothing that I can really point at other than to say that I've been fortunate that I've been able to be involved in projects through the years that relate to biographical work, that relate to sports, all kinds of sports. Mostly what I do, most of the work that I have done behind the camera, and it's very appropriate based on my background, is telling heroic stories about people who have done, in whatever field they're in, have done something special. And I very much gravitate to those kinds of stories, and I love telling them. And I just love finding or being involved in stories about heroic behavior, because I think that people need heroes of every shape and size and endeavor to help inspire what they're going to do. And being able to make content about heroic people is a great way to make that case for others.
Excellent. Dean, I'm a big fan of yours, and the book looks great. And again, it's been an honor speaking with you today. Thank you so much.
You're very kind to chat with me. I appreciate it, Dustin.
And again, that was Dean Butler, Almanzo Wilder from Little House on the Prairie. His new book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond, is available now.